My journey with my wife began 7 years ago when we first got together at the age of 24. We met through mutual friends while we were both in graduate school, and we've grown together in so many ways since then. Over these years, we've built a life, shared countless memories, and ultimately made the decision to commit to each other through marriage. Recently, we celebrated this milestone in our relationship by getting married in a destination wedding. We decided to invite all those close to us, including our friends and family, to join us and share in our happiness. My wife has a large circle of friends, and for the most part, I get along pretty well with almost all of them. She maintains a beautiful network of about 30 friends, most of whom I've come to appreciate over time. However, there are 2 particular male friends of hers that I've always struggled to get along with, no matter how hard I've tried. From the very beginning, we've not seen eye to eye, and over the years, this has only led to a simmering hostility between us. As the tension grew, so did their open hostility towards me. In the midst of planning our wedding, I brought up my concerns about her inviting these particular friends more than once. It was important to me that our special day be free from any underlying tension. I felt so strongly about this that we even had arguments where I implored her not to invite them. Her insistence on including them in our wedding festivities became a sore point, leading to me even threatening, in a moment of frustration, that I might leave her at the altar if those 2 showed up. Her response was straightforward and unwavering. She looked at me, unwavering, and simply said, "You wouldn't do that." And she was right. At the end of the day, I knew my love for her and commitment to our future outweighed everything else. Despite my objections and the clear strain it was putting on us, she decided to invite those 2 friends anyway. It was a 3-day event, and I tried my best to handle the situation diplomatically, keeping my interactions with them civil and brief during the first 2 days of celebration. I couldn't shake off the uncomfortable feeling that lingered as the day approached. The thought of their presence gnawed at me, casting a shadow over my excitement for what should have been the happiest day of our lives. I wrestled with the question of how to approach this, balancing my love for her with these challenges. While the presence of those friends indeed posed a challenge for me, I wanted to make sure it wouldn't distract from the joy and significance of our commitment. As our wedding day approached, I was determined to keep my focus on our union and the celebration of a lifelong journey together. I wanted everything to go smoothly for the sake of our marriage. Despite the challenges, there was something indescribably magical about exchanging vows, surrounded by the people we cherished. It was the beauty of that moment that I tried to hold on to when I felt the tension building. As we stood facing each other, promising to be by each other's sides through thick and thin, I knew I was doing the right thing. The years we'd spent together reinforced my certainty that she was the person I wanted to build a life with. However, beneath the surface, the unresolved issues regarding her friends remained a constant unease. The tension surrounding her decision to invite them was brushing up against boundaries, and we would soon realize that it had set the stage for drama to unfold during and after the wedding. This was not the end of our story, but the continuation of an ongoing discussion and struggle of how to navigate our relationship amidst outside influences. It was a balancing act of priorities, something we would need to address if we were to move forward in our relationship happy and united. The wedding had transformed into much more than just a celebration. It became a reflection of the challenges and realities we were grappling with in our lives together. On the actual day of the wedding, despite my efforts to keep my interactions cordial and limited during the initial days of our celebration, I couldn't ignore the presence of those 2 friends. The atmosphere was filled with excitement and joy, but there was a lingering tension underneath it all. I maintained a polite demeanor, hoping that things would remain calm and respectful. However, as the hours ticked by, it became increasingly apparent that beneath their congratulatory facade, something more sinister was brewing. In the beginning, things seemed relatively calm as I navigated through conversations and exchanged pleasantries with guests. I focused on the joy of marrying the woman I loved, the person I had spent 7 years building a life with. Regardless of my concerns, I wanted our wedding to reflect the love and happiness we shared, so I smiled, shook hands, and mingled. But behind the scenes, unsettling whispers began to circulate. I noticed strange vibes, not just from her friends, but also a subtle tension in the interactions with my own family members. It wasn't until we returned from our idyllic destination, freshly wed and eager to hear about our family's experiences, that the full extent of what had transpired came to light. Sitting across the dinner table from my siblings, exchanging laughs and stories about the big day, their joyful reminiscing suddenly turned solemn. One of my siblings hesitated before revealing an odd encounter during the reception. Apparently, one of my wife's friends, the one I had the most friction with, had approached them, weaving a web of inquiry that was not only intrusive, but deeply troubling. This friend had gone behind my back, asking my siblings a series of probing questions. They wanted to know if I had ever hurt them, abused my wife, or even acted aggressively towards my parents. Although my siblings' assurances were resolute negatives, the fact that those questions were even posed left a troubling mark. In that moment, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could anyone, especially a supposed friend, try to tarnish such a significant day in our lives? As I processed this betrayal, I couldn't help but feel that this situation was a culmination of all those tensions left unaddressed. The next evening, I approached my wife wanting answers, trying to understand the meaning behind her friend's behavior. Her initial reaction was one of confusion, a hesitance to believe that her friend could have acted so maliciously. Her response was dismissive, suggesting that my family might have misunderstood the situation or taken it out of context. But how many different ways could such invasive questions be interpreted? How could she again downplay the dismissive hostility shown by someone she claimed was a friend? This was a day of celebration, our day, and instead, it was marred by baseless accusations designed to dismantle what we were trying to build. When I pressed her for understanding, her defense fractured, revealing a deep-rooted indecision. She wanted to believe the best of her friends, perhaps out of loyalty, but the evidence wasn't adding up. I explained clearly that my family had no reason to fabricate such encounters, especially with someone they barely knew. The more my wife's eyes widened in realization, the more I saw her defensive walls crumble. In the aftermath, what should have been a joyous post-wedding glow was overshadowed by mistrust and discord. My wife, who was openly upset by the growing friction, cried in a way that reflected her own confusion and pain. The tears rolled freely, signaling the internal conflict she faced, caught between the loyalty to her long-standing friends and the commitment she had made to our new life together. It was a painful juncture I hadn't anticipated, where the intricacies of friendships clashed with the framework of our future. I knew what needed to be done, but realized the weight of the choice she had to make. Amidst the hugs and congratulations, I realized some things had to be confronted alone before we could truly move forward as a united pair, and hoped she would see through the chaos and prioritize our newly united life over friendships that brought more hurt than joy. When I told my wife what happened, her initial reaction was almost dismissive. She looked confused and suggested that perhaps my family might have taken his approach the wrong way, or that maybe those questions were meant differently than intended. But how many ways could a direct inquiry into abuse be misinterpreted? My frustration bubbled to the surface as I challenged her defense of this so-called friend. How many different ways could that question mean? I asked, a mix of desperation and hope hanging on her response. Her attempt to brush it off as a simple misunderstanding only deepened my irritation. In trying to avoid conflict, she was inadvertently siding with someone who had clearly disrespected not just me, but our family on our wedding day. This was a day that was supposed to be a sacred celebration of love, and yet here we were, grappling with betrayal. As the evening wore on, my insistence on seeing the situation for what it truly was sparked a shift in her demeanor. Her continuous attempts to justify the friend's behavior began to falter. Do you really believe people fabricated a story about someone they've never met before and even knew his description as well as his name? I asked her, hoping to break through the barrier of denial. In that moment, her eyes finally met mine, and I saw the reality of it all sinking in. Her defenses crumbled, giving way to tears of realization, guilt, and confusion. It was like the weight of all those years of friendship was being reevaluated against the foundations of our marriage. Trying to placate the turmoil both internally and with me, she called the friend in question. I watched, hopeful yet weary, as she dialed the number of someone who had caused us so much distress. This friend of hers lived in Arizona, while we were settled in Illinois, making face-to-face confrontations difficult. On the line, the friend flat out denied ever having said anything, claiming that my siblings must have misunderstood. But why would my siblings lie about something like this? I asked her after ending the call. My argument was met not with answers, but with more tears. She felt conflicted, torn between the friend she had known for years and the life she was building with me. In the days following, the atmosphere between us turned cold. She slept in another room, saying she needed space to process everything. I understood, but it pained me to see the person I loved so distant and hurt. Despite everything, I wanted us to work through it together, yet every attempt to bridge the gap seemed to push us further apart. Whenever I tried approaching her to discuss what was happening, her response was chillingly indifferent. "You don't know what it's like to lose a friend?" she'd say, each time making me feel as though she was continually favoring these long-standing, now questionable friendships over our marriage. Helplessly, I watched her slip further into isolation. Her world seemed to shrink to a singular focus on deciding between our relationship and her loyalty to these friends. It was a painful period, filled with uncertainty and longing for resolve, hoping desperately that she would see what I thought was straightforward, that removing toxic influences was a necessary step toward a healthier, happier future for us both. In a final attempt to mend the growing rift, I proposed we seek couples counseling. I believed the neutrality of a professional could help us both see more clearly and navigate the murky waters of our crisis. This decision proved pivotal, as the counselor was able to open my wife's eyes to the detrimental nature of nurturing toxic relationships. But even this didn't dissolve the emotional barriers overnight. Our sessions sparked debates about the weight of friendships versus marital commitment, conversations which often left us in more tears and stalemates. Yet, each session shed a little more light on the choices ahead, drumming up a glimmer of hope amidst the turmoil. And so, with hesitant steps but renewed encouragement, we tried to piece together our fractured world, one painful revelation at a time. My suggestion to seek couples counseling was, deep down, a plea for help. We needed a way forward, a path to navigate the precarious situation we found ourselves in. Engaging a counselor seemed like a rational step to help us both find clarity and potentially salvage our relationship. During the sessions, I hoped my wife would begin to understand how damaging her friend's behavior was to us. Our counselor, a calm and composed individual, listened intently as we detailed the convolutions of our problem. It was a relief to finally share the burdens with someone who could offer impartial guidance and possibly solutions. In one session, the counselor made a key observation. These two friends are creating a toxic environment in what should be a nurturing relationship. They introduce doubt and division where there should be unity. His words resonated with what I had felt all along. He calmly suggested to my wife, relationships that bring more harm than good need to be reconsidered, regardless of their history. My wife didn't accept this easily. She argued passionately about the significance of a 15-year friendship, her voice tinged with both nostalgia and desperation. "Doesn't 15 years of friendship count for anything?" she asked, almost pleading for validation. The counselor replied with patience and clarity. "The duration of a friendship means nothing if it's pulling you away from your happiness and weakening the foundation of your marriage." Her face was a portrait of internal conflict as she absorbed his perspective. She valued her friendships highly, yet she started realizing that these ties, held onto more for their history than their present value, were indeed fraying at the seams of our union. It was a moment of intense vulnerability for her, confronted by a mirror that reflected a truth she didn't want to see. The strained atmosphere at home did little to ease the situation. Although I had expected some distance while she processed everything, the coldness she displayed threw me off balance completely. It felt as if she was slipping away, tied to memories rather than our shared future. In that emotionally charged week, mutual understanding seemed like a far distant dream. At one point, I expressed my need for some time alone, hoping it would allow me to think clearly about our next steps. My heart ached from the ongoing tension, and I believed that some distance might help us both gain perspective. Her refusal to let our families know of our struggles intensified her isolation. "We're fine," she told me, insisting she'd rather stay at a hotel than reveal her burden to anyone else. Her insistence on keeping everything under wraps felt isolating and frustrating, further stressing the fragile threads of our relationship. This limbo stretched on for longer than I anticipated, but bit by bit, through each counseling session, a glimmer of hope started to emerge. Although slowly, we began unraveling the emotional knots that held us captive. It wasn't easy, and each new layer revealed a fresh set of challenges and the need for even more patience and understanding. But I was determined to support her through this. I clung to the hope that we could move past this chapter towards a happier, healthier future together. As the days turned into weeks, our struggles felt like an endless cycle of painful realizations and brief moments of hope. It seemed like we were caught in an emotional tug of war, each pull straining the very core of our newly formed marriage. I began to wonder if we were destined to be prisoners of our past grievances, rather than forging new beginnings together. Finally, it became evident that something had to give. I approached her with a heavy heart, voicing once again the need for space, a week to be precise, to collect my thoughts and figure out what direction our relationship should take. Perhaps some solitude would provide the clarity I desperately needed. Initially, she reacted with surprise and alarm. "A week away?" she echoed, her eyes wide with apprehension. "What about us? What does this mean for our marriage? Are you leaving me?" Her panic was palpable, and assuring her of my intentions to simply reflect took a concerted effort. I made it clear I was not abandoning her, but rather seeking to process everything that had happened, both past and present. I needed time to internally reconcile the experiences and emotions that had overwhelmed me. Surprisingly, she was receptive, albeit reluctantly. She agreed to my request, but with a stipulation of her own. "I need to know what this means for us sooner, not later. This uncertainty is too much," she stipulated, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded in agreement, recognizing that the liminal state was equally torturous for both of us. However, her initial willingness to grant me time turned into a torrent of mixed messages. Calls and messages, filled with emotions ranging from pleading to anger, streamed in. "How can we fix this?" she implored one evening, her voice edged with desperation. On another occasion, her tone hardened, pressing for a decision. If you decide to walk away, you need to say it now. I can't linger in this limbo. These exchanges paradoxically strengthened my resolve for time apart. If a week away seemed unthinkable to her, I reasoned, then it was perhaps exactly what we needed to foster some perspective. Our close-knit interactions, while comforting at times, seemed to perpetuate the cycle of reactionary emotions we found ourselves trapped in. During this period, those sporadic glimpses of reflection became invaluable. I started to piece together not just what was important to me, but envisioning what our marriage should embody. The solitude offered an informed introspection that was sorely lacking under the weight of immediate conflicts and conversations in the past weeks. Despite the physical distance, I did not completely sever communication, mindful that absolute silence might erode whatever tentative connection we still shared. We exchanged thoughts intermittently, maintaining a thread of continuity, even discussing our counseling progress, which served as stabilizing points. Her texts gradually shifted from panic-stricken inquiries to more reflective musings about our counselor's observations. As our week-long separation drew closer to an end, I knew a decision loomed on the horizon. Not a verdict about ending or continuing our marriage per se, but a commitment to change how we navigated our shared life. Recognizing what was at stake, I resolved to advocate for our relationship more fiercely than before and shift from reactive to constructive discussions. Meanwhile, I could discern a subtle shift in her messages too, a budding willingness to hear not just her thoughts, but to honestly comprehend my feelings. The urgency in her words lessened, replaced by a tentative, yet promising, willingness to genuinely understand how we might move forward without the shadow of intrusive influences clouding our partnership entirely. When we finally reconvened after the week that initially seemed interminable, there was a tangible shift in our demeanor. We finally faced the heart of the matter, ready or not, with determination to start rebuilding our trust, and more importantly, redefine what our marriage meant to both of us. I don't know if I can forgive her again for taking 1.9 weeks to pick me over them. The realization hit hard. It was a deep cut into the foundation of trust we were attempting to rebuild. Each day felt like an uneasy contemplation of our vows, a struggle between understanding her past ties and needing to assert where I stood in her present life. As she lay silent in the other room, the once comforting warmth of our shared life seemed distant and cold. It felt as though I was grappling with shadows, the specter of uncertainty looming large over my thoughts. Could I move past the feeling of being an afterthought when pitted against these friendships? Amidst this emotional turmoil, she called me over the phone, her voice carrying the weight of an ultimatum. "Do you love me enough to stay, despite everything?" she asked, her vulnerability apparent. In that moment, her willingness to ask, even when filled with fear, gave me a sliver of connection, a reminder that beneath the conflict lay seeds of hope for a future together.